America, if it is not clear to you yet that you have chosen the wrong guy, the wrong pony, I don't necessarily mean Trump, I mean between Biden and Sanders. If that has not become abundantly clear, I don't know what you are looking at. The various people that Joe Biden has put into the various cabinet, Biden doesn't have to be in office. People are policy. And if he's putting in lobbyists and these kind of, oil guys, or putting various people from, all of these high-tech industries and whatnot into the various positions, it becomes very clear on what he's or positioning himself as. If he's putting in a guy who was instrumental in wars going for the last 20, 30 years, then that gives you a clear idea on where his foreign policy is going to go. Same thing with the Green New Deal stuff or environmental stuff. He may push for environmental stuff, but I would wager to you that the people who are going to get the money are going to be the various tech sectors, the capitalists of the bunch. One of the things I want to point to you also to kind of make it clear that you've chosen the wrong guy, something that's experiential, just something where you look at and the fact that things happen, they have meaning. Now, you could say nothing has meaning, we give it meaning, but fair enough. But at the very least, from the standpoint of our conceptual environment, when an event takes place, especially when there's human will involved in that particular event, it has meaning. And that meaning, we can, debate and talk about. One case I want to show. Take a look at this. Do you remember this? This was a few weeks ago, so I'm pretty sure you still remember it.
Tax credit in their proposal either. But let's not go into that.
Yeah,
you evidently do not respect the chairman of the committees who wrote these bills.
I respect all of you.
And I wish you would respect the knowledge that goes into getting meeting the needs of the American people. But again, you've been on a jag defending the administration all this time with no knowledge of the difference between our two bills. And I thank you for giving me the opportunity to say that to you in person.
Right. Madam Speaker,
virtually.
these are incredibly difficult times right now, and we'll leave it on that note. Thank you so much for joining
we'll
us.
Leave it on the vote that you are not right on this, Wolf, and I hate to say that to you.
Now, why is Nancy Pelosi so crossed at Wolf? Why is she acting this way? I mean, she's basically losing it. It's because Wolf Blitzer is asking her, look, Donald Trump is offering you $1.8 trillion. You want $2.2 trillion. $400 billion is not a huge amount in the context of all of this. Why don't you just give them the 1.8 and it'll help the American people? At the end of the day, people were dying, 2,000, 3,000 a day. You had all of these businesses shutting down. The majority of the money that went in those other loans basically went to the top upper businesses, meaning the American worker and retail shops got screwed. The government basically tells them to shut down without giving them the capacity to basically to live and deal with that stuff, especially African American businesses. So Wolf is like, let the money out. Nancy, 1.8 trillion is insufficient. And not just insufficient, how dare you question the integrity of all of the people who care so much about the babies. The babies. How dare you, Wolf? You're wrong on this. All right, Wolf is wrong on this. A couple of weeks later, 2-3 weeks, this.
We also have in the legislation direct payments, which were not in the Republican bill, to America's working families. I would like them been bigger, but they are significant, and they will be going out soon. We also have in the legislation.
Now, those payments weren't going to be in the bill at first. They negotiated it away. Nancy Pelosi, after telling Wolf Blitzer that he doesn't know shit about shit and that 1.8 trillion is utterly insufficient, is here saying 900 billion, half of what she said was insufficient, is just dandy. And then all of them get on the media circuit, all of the Democrats, and each one says, this deal is awesome. We got to take this deal. 900 billion, yes. and even go so far as to downplay the pain and suffering of the American worker, of the various people that lost their jobs, of the various people that can't pay their rent, or for the most part are sitting in food lines. Downplaying that. Oh, it's just the people on the far edges that care about this legislation. When Donald Trump came out and he pointed out all of the pork, all of the money that was going to all of these other things with the exception of the American workers, money going into toppling the government in Venezuela, money going to all of these other governments, including $1 billion or $2 billion for Space Force, $1 billion for the wall. You have money going to Israel, $500 million going to Israel. Israel, by the way, has healthcare. Healthcare. We don't. And at the end of all of that pork, will the American worker basically get a pittance? Pelosi comes out and says, this is a good deal. And the Democrats line up and agree. Why are Democrats all of a sudden lining up and agree? Why has it taken Sanders and Donald Trump to basically make the point that this is insufficient? Donald Trump wanted the money to be $2,000 early on, and his aides and whatnot kept pushing him to not blow this up. Now, whether or not you believe Donald Trump came out with the 2000 thing out of malice, meaning he was angry that basically Nancy Pelosi negotiated in bad faith to basically keep the deal so he couldn't necessarily get that deal through, that's fine. Why wouldn't he be pissed off that she negotiated in bad faith for several months and only to tank his presidency? Why would he be pissed off at that? Or whether you believe he's doing it because he cares about America, it's somewhat of a moot point. This was something and an angle that could have been pushed. The Democrats just didn't do it. My point to you is if they believe it, they would push it. And they could push hard on this stuff. And to make the point, 2000 just passed the House of Representatives. Why? How? How did it pass the House of Representatives, even though it couldn't pass the first time around? And therein lies the interesting point about forced to vote. And it also lies the interesting point in what Sanders is doing right now in the Senate as he wages war to try to get the $2,000 read or allowed for a vote on it. The underlying premise of forced to vote is the exact underlying premise that pushed that 2000 across the finish line in the House of Representatives, and is why Mitch McConnell does not want to allow the 2000 up for the vote. What you forget is that what these people are trying to do are get in office. And sometimes, especially when it deals with the real material concerns of the American public, and the American public is paying attention to it, you have a problem. Herein lies the value of forced to vote on Medicare for all. Herein lies the value of using leverage to get them to make that vote. I'll get to that part in a second when I flip over, but I just want to make one clear point. Why is Nancy Pelosi looking so crazy in these two videos? Within one video, she's indignant that Wolf Blitzer would have to murder to question why she wouldn't accept $1.8 trillion. Then a few weeks later, she accepts half of the unacceptable and is trying to sell it to the American public. This is why. Whereas Sanders is fighting tooth and nail to try to get you money, $2,000, and the various people who basically fell off a cliff. Again, 42% of the public was making $18,000 a year before COVID. Before COVID hit, you had, 20, 30 million people without health insurance? And so people were already in dire straits before the devastation hit. This is a Great Depression on top of the Great Depression many times over. Joe Biden, right here. New York Times. Will Republicans and Democrat leaders in the House and Senate fall apart on how much they were willing to accept in the new pandemic spending, Mr. Biden on December 2nd threw his support behind the $900 billion plan pushed by the centrist group. The total was less than half of the $2 trillion that Pelosi and Senator Chuck Schumer Democrats have been insisting on. Mr. Biden's move was not without risk. if it failed to affect the discussions, the president-elect risked looking powerless to move Congress before he took an oath of office. But members of both parties said his intervention was constructive and gave Democrats confidence to pull back on their demands. Yes. Whereas Bernie Sanders is out there fighting tooth and nail in the Senate to try to get you $2,000. The reason why Nancy Pelosi is looking so crazy in those two videos is because Biden basically gave her his approval for less. It's okay to accept less, Nancy. And she obliged. You chose the wrong person, America. The premise, though, is kind of the thing I want to focus on. Pay attention to what Sanders is doing right now. Lefties, independents, whatever. Pay attention to what Sanders is doing. Not only is he fighting for America, it's how he's fighting for America. It's the leverage that he's using in order to do this. Donald Trump vetoed the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act. Now, the reason he vetoed it is because of the Confederate naming and all of this other stuff, not because of the money that was spent. $740 billion without pretty much any argument or anything else. Bam, yes, let's pay for it. Go, let's do it. No issue. Military basically a jobs program that kills people. But no issue. Trump vetoes that bill. Now, the Democrats and Republicans in the House overrode the veto. The Senate is expected to do the same, with Sanders saying, well, wait. Before we override that veto, maybe we should have a conversation about the 2000 bill that has just passed the House of Representatives. Maybe we should give our people here a vote. To which Mitch McConnell said, no. To which Sanders said, fine, but you're not going to be able to veto that bill until you give me a vote on this issue of $2,000. And that fight right now is taking place in the Senate, whereas Sanders is fighting for America. Joe Biden basically was perfectly okay with America getting less. And when they asked Biden, he kind of, with a quip, said, yeah, I'm for the 2,000. Was it possible in that moment for Joe Biden to say, no, I am not for American public getting $2,000? And in that, right there, that impossibility of saying something like that in public, regardless of whatever he thought, the impossibility of him saying, no, I am not for 2,000, is the underlying premise of force to vote and why it's a policy that should be taken. It's not so much that Sanders is going to entirely get, even if he got the vote, that he was going to win it. That's not the point. The point is to put them on record. They used to have this understanding that politics goes beyond just the immediate winning each and everything, that a win goes beyond the very specific contest that you're in. If Mike Pence is in a debate and he's debating with, Tim Kaine. What is his objective in that debate? How do you win that debate? You win that debate by not losing that debate. It's kind of the same thing with Vietnam. Vietnam could never take over and then go after America. What Vietnam could do is stay in Vietnam's hands. So despite the losses and the killings and everything else, their win was not losing. I'm making the point that it's not always necessary to actually win in the overt for some specific tactic. Sometimes the win is the action in and of itself. The leverage that is commanded, the leverage that you show other people that can be used in the political space. And not just that, getting people to put their name on a record for something that is monstrously unpopular. If you believe that Medicare for all is dramatically popular, which it is, and if you believe that people will have some feelings about a politician saying, no, I am not for them having health care at a time where 20 million people have basically been hit with COVID-19. No, I'm not for those people having health care. Then yeah, you should want those people to put their name on a list to say yes, or say no, I'm not for Medicare for all. And every lefty that gets the opportunity to run would be able to run against that person. But again, this is if you have confidence that your particular policy is popular. It goes beyond whether or not you can get Medicare for all passed through the House of Representatives. It goes into this longer term strategy of getting those people out there that don't support the policy and putting their name on a record for it and having people run against. This is the thing that Nancy Pelosi doesn't want. This is the thing that Mitch McConnell is trying to prevent right now in the Senate. Nobody wants to take a difficult vote. And Mitch McConnell is trying to protect his members from taking that difficult vote. The same reason that Nancy Pelosi was able to pass this in the House is because one of those representatives would have to go into the public and talk to the people and tell them, no, you are not worth and deserving of $2,000. And there's going to be people and constituents who are in utter pain and misery that are living in really harsh situations that they're going to have to go and explain to. And it is easier to say, give them the $2,000, as opposed to have to deal with an angry constituency, or for that matter, have to deal with an opponent that beats you over the head with your lack of concern and care for the American public. The point of force to vote, I've given multiple arguments for it, but I just want to make the point that what is taking place right now from the standpoint of Sanders and the premise to which he's using to wage this war into this fight validates the efficacy of force to vote. I'm going to show you what is taking place right now in regards to the Senate. It's actually quite fascinating. I'm going to show you Sanders' entire comment. It's about 3 minutes. I'm going to show you the rebuttal to it also, meaning Chuck Schumer gets involved. I think Mitch McConnell comes back and basically says, yeah, no, I'm not for this. I don't entirely know how far this can go. I mean, at the end of the day, Sanders has a veto. I'm not quite sure how many people are sustaining this veto with him or if he's the lone man in doing this. I think Markley was getting involved in this also. But the question becomes, can they override this? And I'm not quite sure whether they can or not. At the end of the day, Bernie Sanders is holding this up saying, we'll attend to your needs in the military when you attend to the needs of the American public. And this is the war that is being waged. I would point to you, America, that you chose the wrong guy. Welcome to the soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, and subscribe. You can always support this content through PayPal or Patreon. This content is brought to you by you, and I appreciate you the opportunity of allowing me to do it. Man, we're getting to the end of the year. I am so ready to put 2020 in the rears. You have no idea. We're going to have a special for New Year's. My grandmother is ill, and she's going to pass any day. So if something like that intrudes or interrupts, that's why we weren't sure about announcing it, but let's just play it by ear. Just a New Year's Eve show, kind of like the Christmas show. And so that should be a lot of fun. I wanted to show this because my thought is all of these people who are pushing back on force to vote, I got to be honest, I get that how it was presented and some of the things that were said in the presentation of it were problematic. But it's also problematic to not actually give the strategy credence that it deserves. And this is one of those things where it's like, oh, it's not going to bring Jesus home out of nowhere. No, it is not going to do exactly and everything that you want it to do in one fell swoop. Nothing does that. But from the standpoint of a strategy of trying to get Medicare for all passed, yeah, why wouldn't you want people to put their name on the ballot saying they're not for this particular policy so you can run against those people on that very specific policy? 88% of Democrats back Medicare for all. Why wouldn't you try to raise those Democrats to vote those other Democrats out? I guess that's kind of my point. Even from the standpoint of using leverage and showing how that leverage is being used, meaning if Nancy Pelosi wants to get her seat, then Nancy Pelosi needs to, make a choice. I think that's perfectly fine. I'm okay with anybody else getting that seat because at the end of the day, Nancy Pelosi has basically failed. None of them are going to give me exactly what I want. I have no expectation of them giving me exactly what I want. No quarter is expected. None is going to be given. But I look at that from the perspective of adversarial and that I am something fundamentally different. And I'm making the point that other lefties and other progressives should also consider themselves the same. If nothing else, build a fortress around yourself, around this notion that it's Medicare for all or bust. If you don't represent our interests, you don't get our vote. What is our interest? Medicare for all. It's the tip of the spear. If they say, what are you? Say, I am the embodiment of Medicare for all. That is all I care about. I am, look, when you think of things that got passed, whether it was civil rights, workers' rights, those people were relentless to those particular causes. And they were fearless in going out and pushing for those causes. Do you think that there was a way to get civil rights passed without Martin Luther King or without some of the civil rights leaders getting beat and killed? I'm telling you, the answer is no. Any push or change requires some level of risk. And the notion that cowardice is going to somehow get you something that it has never gotten anybody in regards to pushing for either civil rights, workers' rights, women's rights is farcical. And the people who are leading you down that path of vote unconditional, they're not giving you actual politics. Leverage is politics. Using that leverage to get things that you want is politics. It's not just politics. It gives you a certain amount of gravity and credibility that you were willing to act, willing to use that leverage. Sanders is willing in this moment to act and to go scorched earth in his fight for the American worker. Lefties, pay attention. If you're looking for the rationale or the efficacy of forced to vote, the exact reason that $2,000 is passed, the exact reason that you have these Republicans, Lawful or whatever her name is, saying, yeah, she's behind that. Under normal circumstances, she wouldn't be behind it. She just don't want to be on television telling the American worker, no, I don't give a shit about you. Even though that is probably the truth. It's shame. It's shame. You've basically shamed them into this position. Under normal circumstances, the stuff that they're talking about is high level. The money that they're giving to the plutocrats and to oligarchs and to all of these people with cash, that stuff goes on in kind of a way where America doesn't entirely pay attention. But America's hit the skids. Nearly 400,000 people have died. Nearly 20 million people are infected. Within the context, when Obamacare was passed, you had like 26 million people who didn't have health care. And then there's another 8 or 9 million that happened after COVID-19. I'm making the point that America's hit the skids and the downplaying that Democrats were doing in order to try to gaslight people into this face slap of a bill and try to make people think that it was a good thing. It was horrific. And all of them got on board for it. Sanders has been pushing for 2,000 for months. And in this very specific case, he finally gets his lever and he gets to use that leverage to try to force a vote in America's interests. Lefties, pay attention to this. Leverage is a good thing. It's politics 101. And more importantly, about the politics 101, nobody wants to make a difficult vote. And if the leadership can protect their people from making a difficult vote, they will. Medicare for all and telling people that they're not worth health care when you have 88% approval for it is a difficult vote, and a vote that lefties should be trying to force on the political space. The premise and the underlying politics of this, of that force to vote, is basically the exact premise that Sanders is using to try, or at the very least to shame, Republicans to allowing the 2000 to pass in the Senate, or at the very least set up a premise where they have to take a vote saying, no, I am not going to give a beaten down America $2,000. This is excellent politics. Let's take a look.
We have just passed the largest military budget in the history of our country, $740 billion, more than the next 10 nations combined. And by the way, there was almost no debate about the size of that huge budget. Trump's veto dealt with other issues. Meanwhile, over 500,000 Americans are homeless. Half of our working families are struggling to survive paycheck to paycheck. And in the midst of this terrible, unprecedented pandemic, over 90 million Americans are uninsured or underinsured in the midst of a pandemic, and they're not sure whether they can afford to go to a doctor. Madam President, we are coming to the close of one of the most terrible and painful years in American history. That is a tragic fact. Over 330,000 of our people have died from COVID-19, and as we speak, we are seeing record-breaking numbers of new cases and hospitals around the country being overwhelmed with new admissions. During the last year, the education and well-being of tens of millions of our young people, from childcare to graduate school, has been disrupted. And the terrible emotional isolation that this pandemic has caused, where people are unable to spend time with their family or their friends, has resulted in a huge increase in mental illness, drug addiction, and even suicide. Madam President, as I mentioned, the House has done the right thing. By an overwhelming vote, Democrats and Republicans voted to increase that $600 direct payment to $2,000. Recent poll came out. 78% of the American people think that was the right decision. They're hurting. They want help. The leaders of our country, President Trump, President-elect Biden, Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, are all in agreement. We have got to raise that direct payment to $2,000. So that is where we are right now in this historic moment. Do we turn our backs on struggling working families, or do we respond to their pain? So, Madam President, would the senator modify his request that immediately following the vote on the veto override, the Senate proceed to the consideration of H.R. 9051, that the bill be considered read a third time and the Senate vote on passage of the bill without intervening action or debate. Further, that if passed, the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Now, the response to this is pretty swift. I think it's this one right here.
Modify his request that immediately following the vote on the veto override, the Senate proceed to the consideration of H.R. 9051, that the bill be considered read a third time and the Senate vote on passage of the bill without intervening action or debate. Further, that if passed, the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection to the request for modification?
Object.
Objection is heard. Is there objection to the original?
I object.
Objection is heard. Under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Basically, Sanders and Mitch are the loggerheads. Sanders' basic point is, if you want that military budget passed, fair enough, we'll override Trump's veto. First, you will attend to the business of the American public, and you will put that $2,000 up for a vote, to which Mitch says no, because Mitch knows what I know, is that those people do not want to be out there with a single vote, one question. Are you going to give Americans, each and every person, voters, $2,000? And if that senator says no, my contention is that senator is going to have to answer to people who have been hurting in his district, and they're going to be angry at them, and they're not going to vote for them, and not just not vote for them, send mean letters, mean calls, show up at their rallies, say mean things to them. They may even spit on them. This is what they have to deal with. This is what they should have to deal with if they're not willing to deal with the business of the American public. I love the fact that you're putting them on the spot. I love the fact that they have to ask one question: do you want to give the American people $2,000 or not? Mitch knows that his people don't want to do that. I don't even think most of the Democrats want to do that. And yet, I bet you the Democrats will pass it. And I bet you some of those Republicans will also go along with it. Mitch knows what I know. And that is, when you put somebody on the spot, especially for the real material concerns of the American public, those people have to answer for that. When it directly affects America, when it's affecting a hurting population. Yeah, why wouldn't you do that? It's good politics to do that. And that is exactly what Sanders is doing. Love it. Now, how far this goes, I have no idea. I don't know how far this goes. I don't know how far Sanders can push it. I don't know how far Sanders would push it. I mean, to some degree, there's a certain degree of brinksmanship that's always built into this. If Trump doesn't sign the National Defense Authorization Act, he goes to the next president, if I'm not mistaken. And so I would imagine there is a time limit on this. But at the end of the day, these two are loggerheads. Bernie fights for America. And it sets the premise of force to vote. Take a look at this. Well, good politics sets the premise of force to vote. But if you're looking for an example, that was it.
There's one question left today. Do Senate Republicans join with the rest of America in supporting $2,000 checks?
Now, keep in mind, the $2,000 check thing, 70-something% of America said, yeah, that's a good idea. Because America knows that America is hurting. Meaning, I don't care if you give some random person $2,000 that may not need the money. I care more that the money immediately and quickly get out to the people that do need it. And the fact that we've gone for all of these months without attending to the needs of the American public, while you had this kind of negotiation that was in bad faith, while American businesses went belly up, while most of the money went to the top. Even money that was supposed to be allocated for the loans, they even hid where that money went because they knew the majority of that money and those funds went to businesses in these top 1% companies, as opposed to small businesses that needed it. So this is where we are in our politics. I would say America, experientially clear, you chose the wrong guy. I would also say people who are against forced to vote, I have no idea what you're against. Yes, you may not necessarily like the way it was put. By the same token, it doesn't necessarily mean that the politics are wrong. The politics are right. Putting people on the spot for policies that are dramatically popular puts those people in a difficult spot. It's easy to float in the limelight as long as nobody's saying anything to you. But the moment you put a bill up where those people have to vote yay or nay, and the population has a very clear answer in regards to what it wants, yay, that's when beauty is made. And that's what Nancy Pelosi wants to avoid. That's what Chuck Schumer and Sanders in that clip is basically trying to push for. It's not even Schumer. It's more so Sanders and Markey. I'm just making the point that putting people on the spot from the standpoint of a political space is something that is good politics, especially if most of the public is for that policy. The internal politics, especially from the standpoint of the left, doesn't entirely get you anywhere. The mob, the crowd, that gets you somewhere. Who do you think Mitch is scared of here? Why do you think some of the Republicans joined in with the Democrats? Who do you think those Republicans were scared of? They were scared of losing their seat to a hurting American population. And Mitch McConnell is basically trying to protect his people from having to make that vote. It's interesting politics. Very interesting politics. But yeah, Bernie, forlorn, forsaken, but he continues to fight. Thankless warrior. I'm going to say like, going to say share, and I am going to say subscribe. Thanks all. I'll see you guys in a little.